The Internship Eligibility project is an assignment where we focus on using logical operators. The project consists of a student selecting their major between business, administration, justice studies, computer science, cybersecurity and networking, data analytics, mobile app development, programming, and web graphic design, and then choosing which courses in the IT area they have passed or are currently taking. So let's say this business major maybe has taken Photoshop and they're currently taking CS 133, but they have taken and passed the object-oriented programming fundamentals, Visual Basic, and then they're currently taking the C# class. And then they click on Check Eligibility, and they would see that they are eligible to do an internship with ABC Tech Holdings and Entrepreneurial Explorers. Anytime I make a change to either the major or any of the courses, then it resets to the question mark for the icon in front of each employer. So let's change this to Administration and Justice Studies, and we're going to say they've taken the Photoshop, the web design, Python, and C#, and now they're taking the advanced C#. Check the eligibility. The student is eligible for 4 different internships: ABC Tech Holdings, AZ Court Staff, Baseline IT Temps, and Dexterity Incorporated. The clear button clears all the checkboxes for the courses, and again we can make some modifications and continue selecting courses and majors and see the results. Here's my storyboard for the project. I have a panel, which is the green area. Inside that panel is a label for student demographics, and then a group called GRP Majors, group box. And inside that are my radio buttons for the different majors. You can see how I named those. Then I have another group box called GRP Courses. It contains the check boxes of all the past courses, which align with the currently taking checkboxes. The text for each course is part of that currently taking. So the past checkboxes have no text. They simply line up. And you see how I named the past ones and the taking ones. And then I have a button called BTN Clear and another one called BTN Check Eligibility. Over on the right-hand side, we have 7 labels. These have an image list that corresponds to the IMG checkboxes image list. And in that image list, we have 3 icons that are 40 by 40 in size. And I provide those in Canvas. I set the image index of those 7 employer labels to 1, which is the question mark to start with. If it's a red X, it goes to 0. If it's a green check mark, it goes to 2. So what we're going to code in this project then is the check eligibility is the primary implementation in which we are looking at the major and what they've taken and passed, determining if they meet the requirements as specified in the labels of each of these 7 companies. The Clear All button simply clears all the checkboxes. Anytime a radio button or a checkbox changes, then we're going to set all 7 of those LBL icons to the question mark. So they have to make their selections and then click Check Eligibility to see what they're eligible for. Anything not identified is an unnamed label. The formal written instructions are available in our Canvas course site. We talk about the alignment as using logical operators. We use and or. You also get some added experience using checkboxes and buttons and group boxes and panels and image lists and labels and so forth. Giving you the assignment. Requirement is that the focus of this project is on logical operators, so you must use and or in Boolean conditional expressions. You can only use stuff that we've talked about so far, so no arrays, custom functions, lists, or loops. I will tell you the list would come in handy for unchecking all the checkboxes. We'll look at how to do that in the next unit. So create the user interface using the storyboard I provided. Here is the text for the various labels of the employers, and you can copy and paste that into the text properties. We're going to code the check eligibility button to determine which employers they are eligible for interning under, and they'll get a green check mark if they're eligible, a red X if they're not. The Clear All Courses button will clear the check boxes in all of the courses group box and set all the employers to the gray question mark. So here's a couple tips. You can change the order of precedence for logical operators just like we do in math. So in this example, if Boolean OR, and then we have Boolean 2 and Boolean 3. Well, in this case, Boolean 2 and Boolean 3 are evaluated first. That Boolean 2 and Boolean 3, if they're both true, is true. If one of them is not true or neither one of them is true, that's a false. So your choice is Boolean 1 is true or Boolean 2 and Boolean 3 are both true. If we didn't have the parentheses there, then it would be Boolean 1 is true or Boolean 2 is true and Boolean 3 also has to be true along with Boolean 1 or Boolean 2. I would recommend creating some variables for the different check properties. It just makes the coding a little bit cleaner and easier, less typing. So I simply took every checkbox and the checked property and created a Boolean variable for that. Now notice here I didn't put dim P120 as Boolean. Visual Basic will let you get away from that, but it really should have been specified. And then I also created some variables such as dim past 200 that is looking at all of those previous variables, P233, P256, and seeing if any of those are checked. So if there are some situations where the employer wants the student to have passed a 200 level course or they are currently taking a 200 level course. You could do the same thing for pass and taking of a 100 level course. So the result of that is rather than this long 3-line Boolean expression, we can shorten it to be what's highlighted here, if P150 or P156 or P162, etc. You see the code here for changing the image index. You're going to test and debug, make sure everything works. I would make sure that you can have every employer work according to the majors and the courses as they specified, or not work giving a red X if it's lacking something. You're going to submit this with your weekly reflection sheet. I'm going to suggest you pause the video here and try this on your own. Come back and I'll show you my code. I'm not going to spend any time on showing you the creation of the user interface in this code review. By now you should have a pretty good idea of how to create all these controls and add them to your form and change their properties. I gave you the storyboard of how I name things. I will remind you the 3 things we need to code here are the check eligibility button that examines the radio buttons and the check boxes, the checked changed event for all those radio buttons and check boxes to reset the labels to the left of all the employers to the gray question mark if any of those change, and then the clear all courses button, which will reset the check boxes in the courses group box to be unchecked. Let's go over to the code. So I created variables for all of the checked properties of the different check boxes just to simplify the Boolean expressions a little bit. I took the course number and added either a P or a T in front of it for passed or taking. So P120 as Boolean is chk120.passed.checked, and T120 being dimmed as Boolean contains the value of chk120 taking.checked, and then all the others correspond similarly. I also added a couple of variables here, checking if any of the 200 level courses have been passed. We're also checking if any of the 200 level courses are currently being taken. And then I added another taking any, in which I did a taking of several key courses that relate to a specific employer. Then I'm simply going to check the eligibility for each employer. And so here, the ABC Tech Holdings employer is looking for any major who has passed a 100-level object-oriented programming class in either Visual Basic, Python, C#, Swift, Kotlin, C++, or Java. So I discussed earlier we could just check the check property of all of those, but using the variables I set up earlier here, we can just say if P150 or P156. Remember, these are Boolean variables, so they're either true or false. I don't need to check to see if they're true. So if P150 or P156 or P162 or PiOS or PAND for Android or PMAUI or P166 or PCS100 or PCS110, then we're going to set that image index to 2 for the ABC label, so it's a green check mark. Otherwise, we'll set it to 0, which is the red X. And I simply do the same thing for all of the other employers. So here is our AZ Court. Check to make sure that their major is RBAJS, that's checked. Photoshop and HTML, CSS, that's the 120 and 133 courses. For the baseline, I did this in a ternary expression. So we can say the image index equals, and so if RB Cyber is checked, or P156 or 162, they're looking for somebody who's either a cybersecurity major, or taking the Python or C# level 1, then I'll set the icon to 2, otherwise I'm going to set it to 0. So the green check mark or the red X. Same thing for the others. So it's helpful to copy in as a comment what that employer is looking for and then code accordingly to that. So I added the comments for each of those employers in here. And again, I just used ternary expressions. For the Franklin, I dimmed a major qual. Let's make this as Boolean. And here I'm checking if they're a CS major or a data analytics major or a mobile app major or a programming major. And I'm testing if they've passed a 200 level course or are currently taking a 200 level course. The reset eligibility method is the one handling the check changed event for all of the radio buttons and all the check boxes. And all we're doing there is setting those 7 labels, the image index to 1 to get the great question mark. Here is the clear button. Now I mentioned we could do this with a loop. I have that commented out here since you cannot use that at this point, but it'll give you a chance to recognize that you could do this in just a few lines versus the many lines I expect you to do in setting the checked property of all those checkboxes to false. That's my code review. I hope your project worked well. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the Programming Practicum playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos I create, you can click my picture in the top right to subscribe to the channel.